Hey everyone. Welcome to Make It Rock. I'm Thomas Christ, the host of Make It Rock, where I show you how I make it rock and how you can too. What today we are going to be doing is I'm gonna deflate and crush your little hearts, unfortunately, because I'm gonna tell you that originality it will never be achieved. But it's okay. It's okay, and I'm gonna tell you why. Hello to Leela. Welcome. Great show earlier. We got Doug Kidder in the house for the roll call. What's up? We got Russ8889 here rocking with us. Mark Bro is here. What's up, Mark? How you doing? Ed Zielinski with us today as well. Good to see you, Ed. And anybody else who might be lurking, and my lovely wife from downstairs would be one of those people. Did I say hello, Denise? Make sure I say hello to Denise as well. All right. Well, we're gonna get into this, and this is one of those. It's one of those things that, there's Jade Starr just did an excellent show on that Soundbox pack. Thanks for sending everybody over here. So yeah, this is one of those Fat Panda Cat. Welcome, Driven to Right. Good to see you. Good to see you. It's one of those things like everybody. We all have dreams, right? When we come into the studio to make music, and we're gonna make something that's like nothing anybody's ever heard before. And then, you play it, and inevitably somebody's going to say, hey, that sounds like so-and-so, or that sounds a lot like this. And the reason is because, the fact of the matter is that from the moment we're born, it's like when you eat food, like that has an effect on your entire health and your body. So when you eat food, if you eat unhealthy food and stuff, you're going to be unhealthy. But, it's like you are what you eat. Some people say that sometimes. Hello, Audible Video. There I only ever synthesis and derivation and deviation, no originality. All right. Well, but you are what you eat. So from the moment you're born, sounds are entering your ears. They're going into your brain. Those little things that happen in your brain, the synapses and all that stuff, pew, 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 they do that thing. And what ends up happening is we're influenced by that constantly. Whatever you're listening to, whatever music you're putting in your ears, that's gonna come out in the music that you make. And I don't know that there's any way around that. And yeah, our minds are associative machines. So like, you might not think that you're setting out to do something very similar to the music that you like, but it's going to end up that way anyway. But you know what? This is not a new problem. But first of all, we need to figure out, like, what the heck are we defining originality as? So I looked it up. In the only place you would look things up, Wikipedia, of course. Originality, the aspect of created or invented works that distinguish them from reproductions, clones, forgeries, or substantially derivative works. Geez, this sounds like copyright law. But I love this part right here. This is really a great part. The modern idea of originality is, according to some scholars, tied to Romanticism, a notion that is often called romantic originality. The validity of originality as an operational concept has been questioned. For example, there is no clear boundary between derivative and inspired by or in the tradition of. So we're already off the bat. We're on really shaky ground with this whole originality stuff, right? We could definitely be, this is definitely a controversial subject. The concept of originality is both culturally and historically contingent. For example, unattributed reiteration of a published text in one culture might be considered plagiarism, but in another culture might be regarded as convention and veneration. At the time of Shakespeare, it was more common to appreciate the similarity with an admired classical work, and Shakespeare himself avoided unnecessary imagine that, unnecessary. I don't want any unnecessary invention. We don't want to push things too far here, folks. We're only gonna invent things when we absolutely have to. So it wasn't until the start of the 18th century that the concept of originality became an ideal in Western culture. And what that means for the layperson is, like, for a long, long time, people were just, they were they would, like, painters would copy other painters. That's how you learned. That's what you did. It was very rare that people just like, spontaneously came up with something that wasn't inspired by something else. Um, Now, I would argue there's been strings of ideas that have been building upon each other since the dawn of civilization. Since cavemen figured out that they could like, bang on a rock with some sticks or blow into a hollow log or something, and they started making music. We've been building on that ever since then. But it's a shaky concept, and it's not a concept that's accepted um, by all cultures and all people. But you can even go back as early or as recent as like the 1950s and 40s and stuff. And the jazz musicians, they would all do each other's songs. Like if you get an album, even from somebody like an Elvis Presley, very few of those songs you're going to see Elvis Presley actually wrote those. They're all songs from other people. They're all songs from other people. And they were doing this up through the 60s, and really, I think in the 70s is where that, in pop culture, that sort of changed, and people were a lot more, and maybe there may have been copyright law changes. I'm not an expert in the history of copyright law, but there were probably copyright law changes that happened that maybe inspired people to not do that so much, because they were doing it an awful lot, back in the early days. But this is not, this is not a new thing in the Yeah, the first Beatles album had 4 covers on it. We're going to talk about the Beatles in a little bit here too. But this is something, when it comes to our specific situation in rock, blues, rock music that most of us kind of operate in. We have to look back at the birth of blues and jazz, the painful birth of blues and jazz. So 100 years ago, and this was probably in 2017. Yep. What is generally acknowledged as the first recording of jazz was released. Livery Stable Blues, performed by the original Dixieland Jazz Band, was a best-selling record for Victor, but is a problematic first as it is a recording of a white band performing an African American genre. Yes, this was the thing. There's a copyright lawsuit concerning authorship of the piece, but worse, far from crediting the New Orleans African American musicians they learned from, these young musicians claim to have invented jazz. But it was published at an interesting moment in United States history as emerging African American genres of blues and jazz were bursting into American consciousness and spreading across the country and then across the world. Efforts to segregate music in the United States, to market music by European American artists to European Americans, and market music by African American artists to African Americans were defied by African American composers and performers in a variety of ways to get their music to a wider audience. So, yeah, what kind of happened here is in the birth of, these styles of music definitely came out of the African American tradition. But what happened is record companies got involved and racism got involved, and it basically became a thing of like, well, we're not sure that people would necessarily accept the original artists, so we're gonna get white people to perform that music, and then and this was going on well into the 50s and 60s. Elvis is a commonly cited example because I think, to Elvis's credit, I think he did at times give some credit to the artist that he was doing songs from, but there was definitely an effort by these companies to kind of say, hey, we want to put a white face on this music. And so that's just one of the many pitfalls when it comes to originality. What is Mark Bro saying? Well, Doug says, was there any originals on Zeppelin's first album? Fat Panda Cat said, I read somewhere that it was normal to have covers on an album, sort of went out. Yeah, that's the thing. Mark Bro said in the 60s there were a songwriting team. Today the latest hit by Beyonce has 16 right. Yeah, I mean there's a lot of songwriters going on nowadays, but back in these days, you had this great sort of problem that was happening, and a lot of people don't want to acknowledge it because it's kind of an ugly thing, but this music was sort of appropriated Now it's become part of all of our culture, and I would say it's, I I, I don't know that these problems still exist as much as they did back then, but certainly, this was an issue. Um, and Tremor Bear says American black jazz musicians left the states in the teens, 20s, 30s, 40s to go to Europe to learn about the Harlem Renaissance. Yeah. Um, but that was kind of the thing, and so this is just another one of these entanglements with originality that we get into. When we say like, oh well, Elvis was really innovative. Well, yeah, kind of he was, but he was just imitating what the black culture was already doing. So how original was that really? It was definitely influential, no doubt about that. No doubt about that. Fat Panda Cat said there's a video of Frankie Limon singing live, and no one knew he was black. The faces of the audience dropped. Yeah, that's the thing. And and they would get. It's really funny too when they would get like a white jazz band to cover an instrumental piece. It's like, I don't know. The whole thing is it was kind of ridiculous, but that was the times that we were existing in then, and so it just I mentioned this really to say that originality was never really a big thing as much as we think it is. And then we look at this. So if we want to go back a little bit further in time, we can look at this here, the Bach Beethoven connection. So you might think, well, surely Beethoven was original. Surely, he, a musical genius such as Beethoven, was just coming up with brilliance out of his own mind. But so this says here, Johann Sebastian Bach seldom set foot beyond Thuringia or Saxony and published little of the music he wrote. Yet he had a more profound influence on the composers who followed in his wake than any other composer in the history of Western music. That influence proved particularly important for Ludwig van Beethoven, whose first exposure to Bach came at an early stage of his musical development. In our continuing exploration of Bach and beyond, the Carmel Bach Festival focuses this season on the Bach-Beethoven connection and the fruits of Beethoven's encounter with the older master's music. At the time of his death in 1750, Bach was famous among musicians and connoisseurs as a fabulous keyboard artist and composer of tremendous depth and intelligence. The wider public, however, preferred the works of more fashionable composers, Handel, Telemann, and Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach. That other Bach, we don't like Johann Sebastian. We like Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, actually. This would soon change. Bach's remains had hardly been laid to rest when a small army of devoted students, including his two oldest sons, began copying his keyboard works and handing them on to their own students, who, in turn, passed them on to theirs. Let's see if we can get into where, while there are numerous indications of Beethoven's interest in Bach, his early and middle period works contain only occasional hints of Bach's influence. Did playing Bach's preludes and fugues at a tender age have any real effect on the music he composed? At this year's Bach Festival, we have an opportunity to hear. Okay, let's see. But nothing in the three early Beethoven pieces in the Saturday intermezzo recital sounded all like Bach. But in a fallow period following the triumphs of his middle period, Beethoven paused to survey all he had achieved, felt something lacking, and turned back to Bach. I'll be Bach, the supreme master of counterpoint and fugue, for guidance into unexplored continents of mind and spirit. Despite differences in temperament, style, and the times they lived in, Bach and Beethoven pursued similar paths during the last decade of their lives. Each withdrew from the world, but the thing is, a Beethoven fugue became almost an obsession. After all, he had to play catch up while Bach was perfecting the art he had excelled at in his life. One of Bach's towering accomplishments this time was the art of the fugue, a compendium of every conceivable fugal device. Beethoven, fully aware of Bach's precedent, countered with his own art of fugue, the Grobe Fugue, the Great Fugue, Opus 133. The pinnacle of Bach's quest for musical perfection was the Mass in B minor, possibly the last thing he composed. And so what we're seeing here is that Bach was very, very, very much influenced by Beethoven was very much influenced by Bach, and I'll bet you I'll be Bach. Uh, there's a few rock stars that cite him. Not so much into Baroque as classical or romantic. But Johann Sebastian or yeah, there's Offenbach as well. But the whole thing is that what we see here is that Beethoven, which we think of as very different from Bach, like Beethoven was the guy who ushered in the romantic era of symphonic music. It was very different. Bach was in this very like strict style of classical and Baroque music that totally was flipped on its head by Beethoven, but Beethoven was heavily influenced by Bach. So there's nothing original under the sun. And I bet you any money that we could probably go a layer deeper and find out all the people that Bach was influenced by. This is probably some of the earlier, I don't know, like Pachelbel maybe. I'm not totally sure, but Canon in D, yeah, the Canon in D chord progression is very, very popular. Probably because it's so simple and it's so effective. But there's so many great examples of artists that are influenced. They're building their music that we think of as very, very innovative, and they're building it on their influences. They're building it on the things that have come before. So we also have to look at this. This is kind of related to what I was talking about earlier, but African influence in modern music. Anyone who listens to music on the radio or streams it on Spotify or Apple Music has experienced the influence and impact of African music. Music from around the globe, such as samba, salsa, rumba, gospel, hip-hop, reggae, and R&B music all have a common ancestor, and that's African music. So where it all began, Africa boasts a rich, varied landscape of musical styles that transcends borders. Some like Nigerian Fuji and Ghanaian highlife, which melted with other influences to create the popular Afrobeat genre, boast complex intersecting rhythms and percussions that can be heard in funk and jazz as well. Meanwhile, lovers of Afropop should recognize the percussion elements of Nigerian juju and the grooves of Congolese Ndombolo in electronic and pop music across Europe, North America, and parts of Asia. Even characteristics called from African sacred music, like the expert beating of drums, call and response vocalization, and the meticulous layering of rhythms, make people instantly recognize African musical elements and styles from all over the world, from gospel to techno. So there's just yet another example of how our music, the music that we all associate with, we all connect with, goes way back. It goes way back. It goes beyond this country. It goes all the way back to Africa and the traditions of music from there. So then sometimes we get a little bit like Eurocentric with this stuff, and we tend to focus on the Bachs and the Beethovens and so forth. But we neglect the significant contributions of places like Africa, like Asia, like India, that have all come to bear on our music today. Tremor Bear said took a few classes in music history, but that was in the 80s. Yeah, I mean, some of this might be a little bit of a refresher for you. Hey, Sal, Unshackled Spirit, welcome. He says, Whiter Shade of Pale is one similar to Pachelbel. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot. There's like, I think there's modern pop songs that I've heard recently that borrow that same chord progression from Pachelbel. So, it's a really interesting, interesting subject. So, let's take a look now at a little band that people always think are really, really, really innovative and original. Most people tend to at least agree that about the Beatles. How original were the Beatles? Timing, so they say, is everything. There's no doubt that a major factor in the Beatles' success was that they arrived at a time when all this pop music nonsense we hold dear was new and waiting for somebody to take it by the scruff of the neck. With seemingly boundless musical curiosity and a ball-breaking work ethic, they did just that, packing more into a decade than anyone before or since. Unsurprisingly, their sense of adventure, not to mention the sheer volume of material expected of them, meant they acted as musical conduits for their time for transmitting their influences back to the world in Beatle form. As George Martin said of George Harrison, an awful lot of George's songs do sound like something else. And in 1985, Paul McCartney joked to Music Magazine, "We were the biggest knickers in town, plagiarists extraordinaire." See, and that just like there's the old saying, "Great artists steal." Well, yeah, the Beatles certainly did that. Um, hey, Jovel de Pusta is welcome. Good to see you. Um, as we'll see, there were plenty of instances in which they echoed the past in their contemporaries. There is, of course, a fine line between an affectionate tip of the hat and plagiarism. Music lovers tend to do the former, from prog musicians using classical motifs, which definitely was a big thing, and hip hop producers sampling sounds of the past. It's easy to forget that first and foremost, the Beatles were mad about music. Let's look at some of the influences, some of their best known work. So we can look at songs like, Please Please Me. John was intrigued by the pun in Bing Crosby's 1932 hit, Please Lend Your Little Ear to My Please. And this bit of wordplay inspired Please Please Me. So it's just, and there's all kinds of examples here. I'll copy this one and I'll throw it here in a chat for you. So you can take a look at all of these connections and all these different things, that we think of the Beatles as being super, super innovative, and they were just, they were doing a lot of, not plagiarizing, but there was a lot of influence there. Almost every early song was a Chuck Berry ripoff. But who was Chuck Berry ripping off? That's the question. He probably was ripping somebody off too. I mean, he was a great guitar player, obviously, huge guitar player. But everything goes back somewhere. Everything has connections, and we're all, again, the food thing. Whatever we take into our ears, whatever we listen to, we are influenced by. And I'm no exception. I'm certainly no exception to it at all. I can give you one example right off the top of my head because I know I did Hour of Rock on Saturday. I opened that song. I opened that show with Vaccine for Stupidity, and that was basically structurally a ripoff of American Idiot by Green Day. Because I said I kind of want a song that has that same vibe to it. So I, ripped it off. So you know what I'm saying. But a lot of artists do that. I've done it before, where Beatles were just throwing a twist and shout to it. Yeah. Barry was plagiarizing Michael J. Fox. Yes, in the Time Machine. It's like your kids will love it. But yeah, I've done things before where I've said I've taken a song and I said I kind of want this vibe. So let's kind of take and see what are all the sonic textures of that song, and then I can take that and turn it into something new that still has kind of that same vibe of the song that I'm being influenced by, or the song that I'm trying to pay homage to, or whatever. Art regurgitates art, exactly. But I like to see, I like to feel it's almost like a layer cake, and everybody's adding a different layer to it, but it's all built on the layers that came before. And like I said, you could probably peel those layers all the way back to people in caves, banging rocks together or whatever the heck was going on, animal bones. You get funny imagery of like Fred Flintstone sitting there, banging on a whatever, big boulder or something with some dinosaur bones. Of course, dinosaurs and people famously existed together for quite a long time. The Beatles didn't have any musical training or could read music. They only learned by copying others. That's become the standard for most pop musicians now. Exactly. And there is a whole thing of like, how much do you need to know to be a musician? And you would be shocked. Some of the bands, there are bands out there that have musicians that went to Juilliard, you know, plenty of that, plenty of that. There's vocalists who were trained by some of the best opera singers out there, and then you have guys who they picked up a guitar and they learned 3 chords online and they wrote, multi-platinum records. So, uh, it runs the gamut really with that. Flour the same, sugar varies. Famously existed together. you caught you caught that one. Um, but yeah, and this is why it's so difficult to do anything that's original because we are. It's not just this idea that I'm not really trying to promote this idea that like everything's already been done, so why even bother? There is that kind of attitude, and that's the wrong attitude to have, I think, because you find out that it's not really so much you're not going to do anything that hasn't been done before, but you might do something in a way that adds a new element to it that hasn't existed before. And I think that's probably more what we want to like shoot for in terms of originality. Term Bear said one of my favorite modern band, Dirty Loops, made it big on YouTube doing covers. Yeah, and like Hootie and the Blowfish started as an REM covers band. You know, um, and that's it. That's we all we wear our influences on our sleeves, and I can probably listen to a lot of people and get a pretty good idea of like where they're coming from musically. I might not know exactly, but Audible Video said it doesn't have to be original, it just has to communicate. We're all products of our time. And yeah, that's another thing that's really, really big with me. I like the idea of being able to use because I'm big on lyrics. So I just need a vehicle for these lyrics, for these words. And music is I think one of the best vehicles because you think about it, and there's things that like if it wasn't tied to music, would you remember it as well? They go with that theory. It's kind of a mnemonic device. You learn the alphabet when you're a kid. You got the stupid little song, the LMNOP. They're trying to take away the LMNOP. Don't let them take the LMNOP away. I'll fight. I'll fight. I'll fight to my death to defend the honor of LMNOP. There's new ones that they break it up different, and it's wrong. It's just wrong. Mark says I'm not trying to be original. I just want to get these ideas from my head to my DAW. Yeah. At what age are we mostly influenced by music? So I don't have any concrete. I don't have any concrete information about this, but my suspicion is that I know this came up in a discussion recently. My suspicion is that we're most influenced by music in our teenage years. It's just something about our brains are still kind of malleable, putty, but we're getting our own identity and stuff, and we're kind of like we're not just like accepting what other people tell us. We're seeking things out, and we're discovering new things on our own. And I think there's something special about that time that stuff gets really imprinted in there. I always think about it with commercials because I have this I have this weird ability. I can remember all kinds of random and this is what I was saying with the alphabet song. I remember all these weird jingles. All these and I mean I remember them word for word, these jingles for things. Like the best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup. And they sang it with such soul. Like you really believe that. It's Folgers coffee. It's one of the worst coffee in the world. But it's the best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup. Oh, yeah. Give me that Folgers. They wrote some great jingles, but I just so happened to I grew up in the 80s and 90s when the jingles were extraordinary. That they really like those things just got stuck in your head. Or my personal favorite is the what a juicy fruit. Juicy fruit is gonna move ya. Juicy soft, it gets right to ya. Get your steez kind up, grab a stick of juicy fruit. The taste is gonna move ya. I still think that's the best jingle in the history of advertising. It's amazing. Take a sniff, pull it out. Oh man. Ring around the collar. Yeah. Fold your socks. Hey, Dan Eckberg, welcome. Remember the little 12 toes. So see, I think I missed out on that one. I remember a lot of the Sesame Street stuff, I think. You know. But yeah, commercials and TV themes stick in our heads because we heard them so many times. But they're really well written too. They're really well written. Yeah, the Coke song from the 70s. See, I was a little too old, a little too young for that, but I do know the song. What is it? I'd like to buy the world a Coke. Remember in a Levi's advert you could get to a number 1. Yeah. Yeah, the 2 all beef patty special sauce on a sesame seed bun. Yeah. So, it's just so many great examples of that, and how these things get stuck in your head, and, if these commercials, they're, what, 15, 30 seconds long. If those can get in your head like that, what is this other music doing? It's getting in there. It's getting pretty well baked in, and, I do think that, again, like I said, part of it is because the advertising jingles were so damn effective in the 90s, 80s and 90s, whoever they were, they didn't pay those people enough, I don't think. But I was also at an age where I was very receptive. I was also watching a lot of like Saturday morning cartoons and stuff, right? And I'm seeing a lot, watching Full House on repeat every day and whatever. But so I saw a lot of these things over and over and over again. Yeah, in perfect harmony. Tremor Bear, remember stuff from the 60s. And maybe that Tremor Bear, that was when you were like in your formative years. So that's what you remember. I do think there's something to this whole thing of like, you remember stuff more from the time that you were a teenager. Winston cigarette tastes good like a cigarette should. Yeah. See, I think I was some of the ads from the 90s resurrected bands' careers. I remember seeing cigarette ads like in magazines. There was a lot of cigarette ads in magazines, but I think by the time I was around, they weren't on TV anymore. I don't know exactly what year they got rid of the cigarette commercials, but you definitely had like Joe Camel and stuff in the magazines and newspapers, stuff like that. But no artist, if he has original talent, can paint like another. Yeah, the Marlboro Man had his own music. See, that stuff is a little before my time, but I'm just saying, like, we are influenced. By the way, hello and hoy hoy to Gore Team 85. We are influenced by all these things, and we're influenced by the commercials we watch. We're influenced by the TV we watch. We're influenced by the video games that we play. We're influenced by everything around us. Has a great influence on us, and that comes out in our art. Whether we want it to or not, it's going to. So we come to this bigger question here. Is rock music truly dead? That's a concerning thing. So you may wonder, well, if we're declining in terms of originality, and I don't know that we're actually declining. Maybe we're declining a bit in terms of originality in the mainstream because they're playing it so safe. People out there are innovating just as much as they had before. Of course, influenced by the things that came before, but in the mainstream, it's really flatlined because they just don't want to take the chance. They're like, okay, this sounds like the last thing that was popular. We're gonna go with that. And yeah, before I get into this, like Hollywood is doing the same thing. Hollywood's doing the same thing. What are the movies coming out? I was just saying this to my wife the other day, because they announced what movie was it that was coming out, where it was like, there's another one of these movies where it was like, okay, we took an old thing that we haven't remade this one in what, Predator, that's what it was. I saw the commercial for the Predator movie, and I was like, there's probably some guy at like, the movie studios, right? There's probably some guy who's there, and he's like, I got this great new idea for a brand new movie. It's like nothing you've ever seen before. And they're like, no, get out of here. Predator. Yeah, good idea. Let's do that. We're doing Predator. Okay, everybody, get the cast together. We're doing Predator. Tron. Yeah, Tron, because it's got 9-inch nails in it. I wouldn't give a shit about that movie if 9-inch nails wasn't involved with it. But yeah, they just don't want to do anything new, and I think it's the exact same thing in music. It's the exact same thing on television. I mean, I was really struck. I'm watching football on Sunday, and that's really hockey and football is the only things I watch on TV anymore. And I was really shocked at like they advertise all the shows that are coming up on the channel, through the week, and it's all cop dramas. That's all they do, cop dramas. They're like, here, we got a cop drama here, we got this cop drama and that cop drama, we got Matlock and whatever else. It's just like all week, cop dramas. Like, and it's a lot of the shows are the same, like they're bringing Matlock back, but with the female this time. Then they've got NCIS. There's 50 different NCISs now. I don't know. There's no originality in any of this. It's like the same show over and over and over again. It's like it's like Andy Warhol's factory just printing out these cop dramas. You could replace one with the other, you wouldn't even notice. It's the exact same show. Yeah, Matlock. But movies is a whole other thing to compete with streaming and TV. They have to make money. Very in that, yeah. They they used to like when I was in my formative years. See, they had a movie in the theaters called The Blair Witch Project, which was basically like some guy made a horror movie with like an 8mm camera and like no budget at all, and it got in it was huge. It's gigantic, right? That couldn't happen today. That would never happen today. Zero chance. Zero chance of that ever happening. Oh yeah, there you go. Chicago PD, Chicago Fire, Chicago something. It's all Chicago, and it's all cop dramas. I just wish they would do one like NCIS Pittsburgh or something. These guys get down from there. Hey, this guy over here, he killed my brother. I think he did it. I think he's the one that did it. He's the one that done it. They would never greenlight that show either. Aren't you still in your formative years? No, I don't know about that. I'm not so sure I agree with that one. Yeah, they might. Yeah, they did a cops episode years ago in Pittsburgh. It was exactly what you think it would be. But no, it's like the in terms of the mainstream, the originality is just gone. Probably this is why I've said, like, in terms of music, the only places where I'm seeing any like real innovation, if you want to call it that, is probably hip hop. Hip hop, they do seem to be, they're always changing it up. Hip hop is always moving forward. Like, yeah, a lot of it kind of does sound similar, but a lot of it, it's moving forward. It's challenging things. It's being a little bit more, a little bit more controversial. You just don't see it in rock music. It's just like the same song about the same, your heart got broken, the girl, and okay. But and the bands that are out there, the bands that are drawing the biggest crowds, of course, nobody can afford to go to concerts anymore, but they're like legacy bands. The bands that were around in my time, bands even before that, what I see, the newest one is Rush, I guess, going back on tour. Rush from like the 80s. They're even before my time. They're going back on tour. So, but Sergio Menendez in Brazil, 66. I'm not original. My music is influenced by my past. Yeah, we need to take what Tremor Bear said, make that your motto. Embrace it. Embrace it. Forget originality. Who cares? Because we are all products of what we've consumed. We're all products of what we listen to. But let's see about the biggest question in the world, which is rock music truly dead? Rock is dead? I'm a huge fan of rock and roll, but I can't help but wonder if it's truly dead. What is it about rock music that makes it a genre that people think is dead? Is there anything left worth saving, or is the age of rock come and gone? Here's my take. Rock music has become less popular. This is true. Hey, Pete Johns, welcome. So, the music industry is a complicated and dynamic one, so it's difficult to definitively say that rock music has died. We're not pronouncing it dead, but it's on life support right now. We're calling the family, like, you might want to come in, because, yeah. However, there are many signs that indicate the genre may be losing its popularity. In recent years, rock has become less popular than it was in the 1960s and 70s. In fact, according to Rolling Stone's 2015 list of top-selling albums, which only included one rock album. My goodness. No other genre comes close to matching the sales numbers put up by classic rock artists like Bruce Springsteen or Led Zeppelin. The same trend can be seen looking at radio charts. The most popular songs on radio stations today aren't necessarily those written for hard rock bands, but soft rock songs like Taylor Swift's Shake It Off. Record industry has changed a lot. Spotify, Apple Music's taken over as sources of listening for most people, and that means that both artists and labels are less relevant than they used to be. If you want your song to go viral on social media, it's better if it has some kind of story behind it rather than just being good music with no particular message attached. And then you have, this is exactly what I've been saying. Record labels are less inclined to take a chance on new rock bands. Record labels, this can be attributed to several factors. The popularity of rock music has waned over the last few years, with pop dominating the charts. Old rock bands are still touring and selling out venues, but it's harder to sell tickets now because there aren't as many younger fans attending shows. Gee, I wonder why that could be. Is that because the concerts are like $300 for like the bad seats way up high? That could be. Music radio stations no longer play any type of new music or promote it during their programming hours unless they want an artist on their show. They instead feature popular songs from previous decades and play them over and over and over again until they run out of airtime or become boringly repetitive for listeners who don't care about hearing every hit song ever written by someone famous like Garth Brooks or Taylor Swift or whoever. I always just go back to, like, I know if I turn on the alternative rock channel on my radio, which used to have like the latest, newest hits from all the up and coming rock bands. If I turn that on, I'm going to know every song on that damn channel because it's all just stuff that they're just playing the stuff. They're playing the same stuff they have been playing for like 25 years. Rock is no longer the dominant genre and listeners are more interested in pop music. Most teenagers are not buying CDs or paying for downloads anymore. They're more likely to download music illegally. See, I think this is actually reversing. I don't know if I buy this one as much because with things like Apple, but what people are doing is they're streaming. They're doing it legally, but they're doing it through like Spotify and stuff. I think the wave of like illegal people aren't necessarily going on the torrents and stuff as much as they did maybe 15 years ago. But they're doing it through Spotify, they're doing it through Apple Music, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, and the thing is you pay a very, very low amount of money, you get all the music in the world, and how does that really generate income? And it's kind of a flawed premise from the beginning. Old rock bands still tour, but it's getting harder to sell tickets. While rock music is so popular as fans, it's getting harder to sell tickets. Well, yeah, it's harder to sell tickets when you sell the tickets for, you used to be able to go to a show for $30 or $40, and now it's 300 to 400 plus. So yeah, especially for younger people, that's going to be pretty prohibitive. um, well, but you know what though? They find the money when Taylor Swift goes on tour or something. So maybe that's not it. I don't know. Um, Young fans don't want to hear songs played by an older band. Well, that makes sense. If you're over 40 years old and rocking out at concerts, your chances of getting into a show are slim. Um, Especially if you're in a small town or city where there aren't many venues for live music events. I've noticed like it goes in waves here. It seems like lately more people have not been coming. Like more of the artists haven't been coming to Pittsburgh. They've been going to like Cleveland but every couple of years it changes, and then it's like everybody comes to Pittsburgh, and then we're kind of like a bubble city when it comes to touring. Like we might get in there, but there's a good chance we might not too. Um, when you have a second mortgage, it's like concert tickets. What is mainstream? Post Malone 6 years ago. Streaming is pay, so streaming pay is so bad that in Ireland they're pushing an allowance for artists to protect their artistic legacy. Um, there's a mainstream, but we've been on off a tributary system for a long time. Yeah, that's true. We're definitely not part of the mains, but there is a mainstream. There is a mainstream, and I don't know that it matters as much as it used to. I also say, when it comes to um, Cleveland over Pittsburgh only in music. Yeah, but they go to Cleveland. I don't get it. Why do they go to Cleveland? They don't go to Pittsburgh. Rush's tickets are around $500 base price. So you're gonna pay $500 to see. Do you really think Rush, Spaghetti Lee, is Spaghetti Lee giving his best performances right now in 2025? If he is, then okay. But I got a feeling. I got a feeling that he's probably a little bit past the prime. I don't know. Well, Cleveland rocks. Yeah. And I used to be somebody who would go, well, first of all, I can't, like I say, I can't afford these concerts. But I used to be somebody who would go, if there was a band I wanted to see and they were playing Cleveland, I'd just be like, that kind of sucks, but we'll go. Now I'm too old for that. There's no way I'm sitting in a car for, over 4 hours, sitting in traffic to go to this show at some other city, and then driving home. I either have to stay at a hotel or drive home late at night, which ain't happening because I'd probably like fall asleep and crash the car. Hello, Joe, Glenn, welcome. But yeah, so it's tough to get. I'm not gonna criticize people for not going to concerts, because it is crazy. These prices, buy a cheap guitar and amp and learn the songs yourself. Yeah. Start up your own cover band. It will save you thousands. So yeah, is rock music dead? I don't know. Is it gonna come back at some point? I don't know. It could, but I think somebody has to make that happen. 4 hours, you're still in Arizona. Save our ears and watch on TV. Yeah. Or on YouTube. On YouTube. That's where it's at. Because, we got people. Now, you'll notice if you see footage from any kind of concert. Hello, Barry Glenn. If you see concert footage these days, you see everybody there, and they're all doing this. They're all doing this. They got the phones, right? They got the phones. And the nice thing about that is you can see any concert that's happened probably in the last, 20 years. It's on YouTube. I guarantee you it's on YouTube. Somebody's uploaded the entire show to YouTube in, questionable quality sometimes. Man, some of those old phones, from 2010 or so, 2012. Some of that was rough, depending on where they were in the venue. Because if you got a little further back and you weren't like getting blown out with the bass, it would be okay. But if they're right up in the front, it was terrible, absolutely terrible. That bass would just blow everything out, and it just. But it was still cool. Even then, it was like, okay, well, we can see the show. We didn't actually get to go to it. And I'm just waiting for them to figure out a way to shut all that down. They'll probably come up with something like some kind of a signal that goes out through the PA system that you can't hear, but it renders like just like disables all phones. Like they're gonna come up with something like that, and we'll be the worst for it. Dan Eckberg says, "Man, I saw Fever 333, some other opener AIC corn for $40 in 2019. I know, because you can't do it anymore." There's a website that has the song list for concerts going back to the 70s. Are you talking about setlist.fm? That's a great one. Setlist.fm. They got everything. You just type a band in, you could see what did they play last night, because somebody's going to go home immediately. I remember like there was a time where you had to like every band had a lot of bands had like a forum. They had like a forum on their website, and somebody would have to like go to the show, write everything down, come back home. You'd have to wait for all this, and then they would type in what the set list was, and you hope they got everything right and didn't forget anything. Or there'd be somebody else the next day that would be like, "Oh, they didn't play that." But now we got setlist.fm. People are there live tweet, updating it live as the show happens. The bands are uploading the shows in good quality. Yeah, some bands have chosen to do that. I think that's a good idea. And you could even do it a thing where you pay, for a monthly fee or something. If you're a band that tours a lot, you could probably set something up. I'm sure there's probably a service out there that'll do it, but you could probably also set it up yourself where you have these videos unlisted on YouTube or something, and you charge a monthly fee or a yearly fee or something, and you can access all of the recordings in high quality right off the desk from all the shows that they do, and something like that would be awesome. Trevor Bear went to about 300 plus concerts in the 80s. I can imagine, like, concerts in the 80s would have been awesome. That would have been really great because, you're not going to get to see it. You're not going to know anything. There's no internet back then. Unless you had a friend that went to it, you're probably not even going to know, or it's published in a rock magazine or something. You're not even going to know, or the local newspaper maybe does a story on the show. You're not even going to know what songs they played. The only band I saw 3 or 4 times was the Pat Metheny group. Oh, you like the jazzy stuff. I like the jazzy stuff. Mark Bro says they're all on YouTube, from the Doobie Brothers to Sabaton to The Warning and Muse. And the best stuff really is like the people that, and God bless them, man, the people that went back in the day before YouTube, and they did the taping of shows and the bootlegging stuff. It was like a hardcore thing, these were serious people that got really high end equipment. They went in there, they had things, it was in the hat, it was in the glasses, whatever. They would go in there and they would tape these shows, and the quality was awesome. Quality was great. And if you had video with it, it was like awesome, because nobody else had phones up, like they do now, and you can't see anything. So, yeah, really, really great, the bootlegging community. I don't know how we got off on this tangent, but I like it though. Chimp Bonobo Continuum. Dark mutterings. My partner still loves to grab a set list, but quite a few shows we've been to recently, the bands haven't had any on paper. Wow. I've still seen paper set lists. That's interesting. Yeah, I guess that we're not far from that era, and that's gonna be a big loss, because It was always cool to. That was another thing that was cool. If you did manage to get the set list, you could post that on the band's forum. You know, that was a good thing to do. Went to a concert starting at 11 a.m. and ended at 1:30 a.m. 6 to 7 bands. That's a long time. I think, yeah, that'd be quite a bit. So a paper set list just the other, yeah. As far as I've seen, most of them are still doing it. But Barry Glenn says, when I was in my teens, concerts by successful recording artists were affordable, not like $200 to $300. Yeah, exactly. That's what I've been saying. It's too. The prices are too damn high. Come on, bands. It's not. I know it's not your fault. It's Ticketmaster and all these people. The bands just show up. They don't know. Like, yeah, they find out about it. They're like, that sucks. I didn't know it was that much to see us. We have to do something about that. Oh wait, we can't because they have all the power. The ticket, the master of the tickets again. We're back to the master of tickets. But yes, originality. Just keep just do the things you do. Enjoy the music you enjoy. Make the music you like making. Don't worry about this originality stuff because we're all a part of the great human originality that is still evolving and changing and growing. So that's what's really important. Not any kind of like, oh, I've done something that nobody else has done before, except all the other people that did it, and the people that did it that I listened to that made me want to do that in the first place. Anyway, thank you all for being here. We got You Rock TV coming up. I was working today on editing that video. Recorded the stuff last night, and I just have a few more finishing touches to put together. It's going to be fantastic. So I hope you'll come back for that. That'll be at 5 p.m. Eastern, right after Leela's live performance and Jade Starr's show. So come back for that, and yeah, I hope to see you there. All right. Well, Jade has a members show. I got the dump set for that. So I'll see you over there. Much love. Take care, everybody, and keep rocking. See ya.